accessibility is for everyone, and we should be stoked about it because it really is a game changer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Brill, and in this episode, we're going to dive deeper into the world of accessibility and talk about compliance. And we've got another special guest here with us. We've already spoken with her before, so it's going to be a treat, and it is Alaina Beaver. Alaina, a pleasure to talk with you again today.
So thank you so much, Bobby. I'm delighted to be here and talking with you today. My name is Alaina Beaver. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the head of accessibility customer engagement at ServiceNow.
Now, that is a little different and a little more specific in some of the accessibility conversations we've had. You're dealing with the customer, which really comes down to everything that we're doing is helping our customers. But explain that a little bit more. How is that different from, say, working with people internally?
I have the privilege of being able to evangelize accessibility and really get out there and tell our customers all about our accessibility commitment at ServiceNow and really explain where we've been and where we're going with regards to digital accessibility and the ways that we're baking accessibility into all of our products that we offer at ServiceNow. And it's really a fantastic story. So I don't want to, get too off track about that piece of it. But I will say that our customers care really deeply about compliance, or as I like to talk about it, it's really conformance. Whether or not we are adhering to the global standards for accessibility and ensuring that when they're with us, we help keep them safe. They're never going to have any kind of a compliance lag or major problem that will adversely impact their citizens or their customers or ultimate end users when it comes to accessibility. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about our compliance/conformance story.
Well, that's the part that's really interesting because we talk about accessibility all the time. We have several episodes where we talk about why it's important and how it is important and really all of the good that it brings for everybody. But you have to do it when you have a product. And I'm sure there's a lot of rules and a lot of regulations and beyond that, the legal terms of how to do it correctly. And also I want to have you break that down a little bit more where you said global.
Yeah.
And this is not a US thing. This is a global thing because we're talking about the web, we're talking about mobile, and this is, all 7 billion of us using this. Briefly, give us some insights into what compliance and conformance or conformity is.
Yeah, happy to. So overall, there's legislation around the world that helps govern accessibility. And when we talk about accessibility in this realm, we're talking about, although it started in the physical realm with the Americans with Disabilities Act, we now are, when we talk about accessibility, conformance, and compliance for business, really, we're mostly talking about it in the digital space. And so while there are dozens of legislative pieces across the world, across the different geos and different countries that ServiceNow operates in and supports, we all, for the most part, ladder up to one piece of international guidelines, which are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or otherwise known as WCAG. So when you see that WCAG abbreviation, WCAG is like the cool, in the know way to pronounce that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And so right now, those standards are at level 2.1 AA conformance level. And so that is the set of standards. If you go online and just search it, Google it, W3C is the organization that puts those out. And so those are the conformance standards that everyone's legislation is laddering up to currently. Now, as technology evolves, the standards also evolve. And so last year we had WCAG 2.2 released. And now we are in that transitional phase of legislation catching up. And so as legislation advances, we're going to see a lot of conformance being set at this new standard of WCAG 2.2 AA instead of 2.1. And so the onus is now on business to likewise level up our game, make sure we're meeting those higher standards, and that way we're remaining quote unquote in compliance. You know, I'll talk about it maybe in a little bit, but compliance is sometimes a bit of a misnomer when it comes to accessibility and how we actually parse it and talk about it in business. But yeah, when it comes to the standards and where things are heading, really 2025 is going to be a super big year. We see WCAG 2.2 being enforced in the state of Colorado, which is where I hail from, for example, by July 1st of 2025. In the EU, for example, those standards hit at the end of June. And then, for example, higher education has declared, the Department of Justice has declared that in the states, all of our higher education institutions must be conformant by April of 2026. So we're seeing like these big notices being given of when we're going to start holding people accountable for this higher level of conformance to these standards so that people have time to prepare.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of a newer way of thinking about this because it had always been, oh, we need to do this. Yeah, we'll do it. Okay, we'll devote some time. But now this is global. This is, you know, this is we have to do this. We know why we have to do that, but this is really um, a heavy lifting type of process when it comes to getting your content, your website, your platforms compliant. Correct?
Exactly. Yes. So when we say compliant or conformant to these accessibility standards, we're really talking about public sector spaces. So the legislation right now applies to a mandate essentially across any kind of public service that is funded by government. And there are a lot of other industries as well, though, that are in the private sector space that have been repeatedly seeing lawsuits related to accessibility. There were over 4,000 lawsuits related to accessibility in the United States in 2022 alone. So, this is something that should be taken very seriously because it's not going away. Legislation continues to double down on mandating accessible, conformant to WCAG digital experiences, and states and other smaller legislative bodies are also catching up and not only building on the ADA but actually going a step above what the national standard is. And so you have states like Colorado and California really leaning in and saying, look, we have got to double down. We need to make sure all of these websites are accessible to people who use screen readers or other assistive technologies. We need to ensure that they're accessible. And now the legislation is advancing to the point where it's not just the front door anymore. There's a recognition now in legislation that whoever provided that technology to you is on the hook. And so, therefore, companies like ServiceNow have a vested interest in making sure that we're shipping accessible product because we could also be exposed to a potential lawsuit in the future if we lag behind in this area.
Oh wow! So this is serious with all caps. This is
Yes.
something we really need to take care of.
Yeah.
I want you to because I know a lot of people, are still trying to figure this out. If you're not really involved in understanding accessibility or involved in it at the planning stage, or you're just the person at the end. Okay, you got to make your thing accessible. Go. Can you walk us through just briefly some of the disabilities that we focus on, and so that people can understand what we're talking about? That it's not just, I say it all the time. Where we think about physical disabilities that may be adding ramps and handrails, but since we're talking about web platforms and mobile platforms, it's a little bit different. But very broad that we don't always think about some of these things. What are some of those things we focus on?
Oh, absolutely. I love talking about designing for accessibility because there's a big difference in my mind between accessibility and disability. a lot of times people equate those in their mind, but really designing technology to be maximally inclusive to everyone, it has more to do with how are we going to make sure that the technology is flexible and can play to any user that's going to pick it up and engage. And so absolutely, we designed so that people who are blind and who rely on screen readers, that's a technology that reads everything in the UI out loud to you and allows you to use a keyboard to navigate that environment. Same thing works in mobile. You would use a series of swipes and touches to interact with a screen reader on a mobile device. Um, all of our technology is going to work for that user, but it also will work for a low vision user who is colorblind, for example, or who has, a need to invert the colors of an interface into a dark mode so that it's easier on the eyes and reduces eye strain over a period of hours, right? All of those different things kind of fall into that general functional limitation of being visually impaired to some degree. But truly, anybody who wants to, well, you and I are both glasses wearers.
Right, exactly.
So we use our assistive technology every day in that regard. But even if I want to go outside and take a call, out on my patio and it's a bright sunny day, I'm going to be adjusting the brightness of my screen so that I could work with sun glare, right? Like that is a temporary or a situational need that I have related to visual impairment, but my technology has been proactively designed to anticipate that need. And so I can adjust my screen and my settings and go on with what I need to do. And so, really, when we're designing for accessibility, it's all about how can we be maximally inclusive? How can we proactively design to this broad range of use cases where at the one end of the spectrum you might have people who are permanently visually impaired, and on the other end of the spectrum, it's, people have a temporary or situational inconvenience related to vision impairment. If I break my glasses, I'm going to be changing some things up until I can get another set of glasses. And so, yeah, that's really more about how we think about it is that, we're really designing for inclusion and diversity while also keeping in mind that these standards exist. Yes, they're they're these standards exist. They are the floor, not the ceiling. So when it comes to WCAG standards, this is the baseline. We're all starting on at the baseline. But let's smash that glass ceiling and let's go through the roof and think about what is a truly beautiful experience for that blind user. What is a truly beautiful and useful experience for any user? And so that's where we really want to go.
That sounds like, why are we not doing this all the time? I know a lot of people who have been devoting their time and their career to accessibility. It's like, oh my gosh, why did we never think about this? And you mentioned we're both wearing glasses, and the joke is my arm's never long enough to read the newspaper anymore. But like you said, oh, I want to adjust the brightness, or I want it to read back to me. How many of us use things like Alexa and Google? And I'm not going
Uh-huh.
to say it too many times so it doesn't take over our spaces as I say it out loud and all my lights go off.
Of course.
Um, and there's things like cognitive understanding and speech, and then of course the physical as well. That this seems just like a tremendous opportunity from the business side, from the right thing to do, and then having our customers become better for their customers. It's this weird trickle down effect that
Yeah, exactly.
sounds amazing.
Well, and that's what's exciting about being at a company like ServiceNow and doing accessibility work is that we are keenly aware that our impact is exponential, right? And so by shipping accessible software as a B2B company, we are having this tremendous exponential downstream effect on the actual users and citizens and ordinary people who are using the ServiceNow platform for their everyday job, right? And they are in our technology and doing their work, as their everyday, like 8 hour a day experience. And so we want to make sure that that's as painless as possible. And so the more that we proactively design for people to choose their own adventure, so to speak, we want people to be able to do that so that they can self accommodate if they don't necessarily have a disability that they consider is impairing them in everyday life, but there's a way that technology can make them more efficient or more successful in their day-to-day interactions with technology. So, for example, we just won an award at ServiceNow. Fast Company awarded us a top workplace for innovators in 2024. It's the first time that ServiceNow as a company has been on this list for this particular award. And we won it because the accessibility product team, my team, submitted a neurodiversity plugin, a set of tools that we've created to support people who are neurodiverse in how they read. And so it changes all of the text in the UI in four dynamic ways and moves text into four different font families that are research backed, research proven to significantly improve the experience for people with dyslexia, ADHD, people on the autism spectrum, or who just have any kind of reading disability or impairment. And so, or even, I don't know, it's a spectrum, right? Like at the end of the day, I am sick of staring at a screen all day long and I want to adjust the line height so that things are easier to skim, right? Like,
Well, it's funny. Again, we're two of us have our glasses, so every year we go to our optometrist, and they go, "How often do you use your computer?" When am I not looking at my
right.
computer? I'm on a screen 19 hours a day, probably 22 in my sleep. So yeah, this idea of making a screen easier to use at different points throughout your day is kind of like, oh yeah, why have we not thought of that before? That
Yeah.
makes way too much sense.
Yeah.
So the big question, where do we start? How do we start and move forward when it comes to compliance?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to circle back to this compliance word because it's a little bit of a slippery fish. So whenever I talk to my sales friends and they're like, okay, we want to approach this new organization and we need to fill out their request for proposal. So they're filling out these RFPs and they're like, there's a question about accessibility. And it's always just a yes or no question. Are we accessible?
Big fingers crossed.
Right, right. And they're like, "Ooh, how do I answer? What do I do?" And so I've developed some materials to help train our folks internally and just provide like some guidebook, like here's the little playbook, here's the resource that you use, sales kit, like on accessibility, take this, go forth. Right. So outside of that training, it's yes, we are compliant. However, the way that compliance is communicated is that you fill out a voluntary product accessibility template. This, like the WCAG standards, has been developed by sort of a third party group that has put together this template and makes it so that you go through a set of tests, essentially, of how conformant an experience is in passing the WCAG standards. And you fill out this template, and as you fill it out, it generates an accessibility conformance report. And so, people in the industry are like, okay, I want to see your VPAT, right? I want to see the ACR for this product, right? So we have these documents and they're all cataloged publicly on our website. We want to make it very easy and transparent for anyone who's interested in our accessibility documentation to find it, because we have nothing to hide. And so with every release, we have new VPATs that are updated. Whenever we make a change to the UI in any way, we rerun the VPAT and produce a new ACR so that these are produced. We do use an external consultant agency to produce these tests for us, by the way. So we don't tell you to just take our word for it with like a wink and a nudge, like, sure, we're compliant. We produce the reports through a professional entity that audits them and gives us the results back, and that's what we produce the reports from. And so then they're put and made publicly available. We do, by the way, have our own robust accessibility engineering team. So we do internal testing. We employ people with disabilities who use a wide range of assistive technologies at ServiceNow because we are deeply committed to testing and proactively leaning into anything new that we release and ensuring that accessibility is part of our definition of done. So in that sense of, our conformance story, like, we have rules internally around accessibility, and our commitment runs really deep, which is fantastic. But also, in terms of just what we share publicly, we try to make all of that information as available as possible. Now, when you go into any one of these reports, there's like a couple different ratings in how you get scored. And it could be either supports or partially supports, or, that it fails. Um, you might see some partially supports here and there. That's pretty normal. If something is a dependency on a third party that we don't control, but it's something that is utilized and is part of our platform, it might be that we are already in an embargoed battle with that third party, pushing them to up their game on accessibility and to make their experience accessible so that we can then, mark it off as fully supports. So I'm sharing that just because, within the accessibility industry, it's widely known that, nothing is ever 100% perfect all the time. If you see VPATs where everything says supports, chances are they didn't know what they were doing when they filled it out, or they're lying. That's a cynical way of looking at it, perhaps, but it's normal to have regression with technology. The thing that differentiates whether or not you're going to have a conformant experience as an end user is the commitment of the team and the technology provider, which is ServiceNow, in making good on their promises. So if we say, look, we are committed to accessibility, we are dedicated to 2.2 conformance in the long haul. We never want you to worry when you're with us, whether or not you're going to have a legal compliance issue or be sued or anything like that. We are dedicated to making this right for you.
What should people be looking for? We mentioned, how are what are some of the accessibility issues and things to look for. What we at ServiceNow are doing both with our customers and helping to lead the way. What are some good things for people to just start thinking about and really kind of key on when it comes to doing this correctly?
Earlier in my career, I was in public sector. I worked at an R1 institution for higher learning here in the United States, and so as part of a Research One university, we would evaluate our vendors and be looking at these VPATs and these ACRs and the documentation. And it was always very important to ask those hard questions around accessibility, to make sure that it was included in the contract language, to make sure that the organizations had a clear presence with regards to accessibility, a vision, a statement on the website, all of that. We have all of that and more at ServiceNow. It's taken some time for us to share this information internally and externally. And so now that's the place that our team is at, is, we're getting out there and trying to tell our story more to the public and more to each other, really, just so that we're all better aware of, just how good we are at this, without us, sounding like I'm tooting my own horn. Like,
Well, this is where I cue in the orchestra. We have the whole wind section here that says "toot, toot, toot
oh,
away." But yeah,
exactly.
this is really a very difficult road to go down if you're starting from zero.
Mhm.
And it sounds like we're not only building the roads, we're paving the roads, we're upkeeping the roads, and we're putting in new guide markers. Correct?
Sort of the magical thing about ServiceNow's approach to accessibility, and part of what drew me to this organization, is that we do have this deep commitment that is top down. So, up to the C suite level leadership, people recognize that accessibility is a must have, not a nice to have. And we've not only created a team in a relatively short amount of time, the accessibility product team, and locating accessibility within product is a really, like, genius strategic move, in my opinion. And not having it, in a compliance arm or part of DEI or in UX. Like we are embedded within product, and that allows us to be the bridge that is connecting UX research to design to engineering, and we can really drive forward these accessibility initiatives and ensure they get done. We can also play with innovators and the people who are designing just groundbreaking product with AI and help push forward new innovations that are making things better for everyone. So that's my little sort of toot about what we're doing in terms of our placement of our team. But our accessibility team is at like this very mature adolescent stage. I think we still have more room and more to go until we are like a fully fledged, like complete model for anybody anywhere accessibility team, but we're real close. I've worked with a lot of organizations and have seen a wide range of maturity when it comes to an accessibility team and the level of impact they're able to have within their respective organization. So, we've been able to do a lot with conformance and ensuring things are built into the definition of done, cleaning up all of the old bugs and all of the problems from the legacy stacks and the way that the product has been over time, and now we're leaning into the future. And so there's still a little bit of that dance where we're looking backwards and forwards at the same time. And now our gaze is shifting more and more forward. And I think you'll see as we head into these next couple years to come, we're going to keep winning awards. We're going to keep being seen as industry leaders in this space because of the strong commitment that we have from top leadership down.
To take us out, what's the one thing you want people to take away from thinking about compliance and accessibility?
Accessibility is everyone's job. So let me just start there. It's not something that should just be handled over here and somebody else will think about it and then it'll just be done and we can all walk away. Accessibility conformance is a journey. As technology evolves, our conformance story will evolve. There will be new standards to shoot for and to overtake and then, shoot beyond that to the moon. Like we are going to be the people that are helping to set the standard for what the goals should be because we are just designing such beautiful, accessible, inclusive technology that empowers everyone, right? We want to be a company where when people talk about the gains in productivity that their organization is reaping as a result of their AI investments, we want them to right along with that say, and we have strong accessibility investments that are empowering our workforce, that are making people happy, and that feeling like you truly belong at work, like you're seen and you can show up and you can modify anything in your digital workspace to maximize your productivity. That is absolutely the kind of metric that we want people to be able to talk about as well and say, you know what, our accessibility investments are likewise saving us an additional percentage of time. And so now as a company, we can take all of this time savings, all of this productivity and move forward and just deliver these world-class experiences. That's really what I want everybody to know is that accessibility is for everyone. And we should be stoked about it because it really is a game changer.
So there you have it, a little bit more information and understanding into the world of accessibility and compliance. And if you're interested in learning more about the ServiceNow platform, head over to www.servicenow.com/docs for more information. And if you enjoy what you're hearing so far, please hit subscribe on whatever device you're listening to so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Bobby Brill. Thanks for listening.